The oldest and most mysterious works of art from Sierra Leone are carved in soapstone or other forms of stone. And they're mysterious because we do not know exactly who carved them. And they are found in the ground in the course of the present people's farm operations, or in digging for diamonds, or in other work which disturbs the soil. So they are sometimes found quite deeply buried in the soil. The assumption that we make is that these were produced by the earlier inhabitants of the south and southeast and east of Sierra Leone, where they are exclusively found. So they are not found all over Sierra Leone, but they are found in an area which runs parallel to the Liberian-Sierra Leone border, as far as the areas of Kono and Kissi areas in the interior. They are generally divided stylistically into two groups. There is a group that is found closer to the coast in the area occupied now by the Mende, and they are called therefore by the Mende name, which is Nomoli. The use that the Mende make of them nowadays when they find them has been that they erect shrines in the fields, and they put these figures into the shrines and make offerings to them in order to have good crops. And so they are sometimes described in the literature as rice gods. But that reflects the use which the Mende make of them at the present day and doesn't say anything about their original significance. The particular features of these Nomoli carvings is that they have extraordinarily protruding eyes. It shows particularly clearly in this figure where the eyes really seem to be bulging out from under the eyelids. They have a rather full fleshy nose and full lips. Usually the head is smoothed, so there is no indication of hair. Sometimes, as in this one, there seems to be something like a beard at the side of the face indicated, and the figure in this case sitting down is holding the beard in its two hands. The other sort of stone figure that we found are in some ways simpler and more upright. In some cases they just form a cylinder with a fairly rude representation of features. This figure is slightly more developed. It is basically a cylinder. The body is shaped as a cylinder. There are little projections at the bottom which may be feet. There are what seem to be breasts, in which case this is slightly unusual because most of the stone figures we see are female. There is a very clear indication of a necklace which the figure is wearing. The head, however, is quite different from that of the Nomoli. Whereas the Nomoli heads, generally speaking, are smooth, this has a fairly detailed, though now slightly abraded, design and pattern on the surface. You will also see that the body is decorated in the same way with geometrical patterns, triangles and lines. The face, again, is different from that of the Nomoli. The eyes, rather than bulging, are just slits. And a particular feature of some of these carvings, which are generally called by the Kissi word pondo carvings, is that there is an open mouth and some sharpened teeth which are visible, so that the figure is apparently smiling or grimacing, showing the teeth. That is known as the archaic smile, so it's assumed not to be a smile, but a demonstration of the sharpened teeth of the individual. A slightly more elaborate version of this carving is this figure here, which shows the figure sitting. The eyes in this case are slightly bulging, but in a way different from those of the Nomoli carving, where they bulge from within eyelids. The nose is not full so much as sharply projecting, but the archaic smile or grimace, the showing of the teeth, is particularly pronounced in this figure. The mouth is wide open, drawn back, and the sharpened teeth are clearly visible. You can see also that there is a good deal of patterning and decoration around the neck and the head. The ears are curiously displaced and up towards the top of the head, and the figure is shown as wearing something like a turban or cap, which you can see here, with what looks like a scarf or something around the edge. In this case, the figure is sitting and seems to be holding some kind of bow in its hands. Now, these figures are characteristically found further inland than the Nomoli, in areas now populated by the Kissi and the Kono. Now, as well as the Nomoli carvings and the Pondo, there are some carvings which do not very easily relate to that distinction between the two types. And these are pedestal heads, sometimes called mahiyafe or chief's devils, though I think there's some reason to doubt if they should be referred to in that way. They tend to be on a larger scale than the figures I've been talking about, though here is an example of a comparatively small pedestal head. The head rests on a very sturdy neck. You have the eyes not bulging so much as the eyelids coming down, and the eyes not being suggested but not being perfectly shown. You sometimes find in these the representation of jewellery. So here on this one you see the ring, the earring there, and sometimes you also find rings on the nose on these figures. Generally speaking, you find also that there's a representation of hair, sometimes of a beard. Now I say it's a smaller example than those which are common. Here is a more typical example. It's extraordinarily heavy, so I will just rest it, if I may, on the edge of the table. Again, you see here it's an extraordinary size. It's on this very large and strong neck. There is the representation of the hair with some kind of decoration. You can see the kind of patterning going round there, and some indication of patterning around the edge of the hair. The eyelids, what you see here, are eyelids rather than bulging eyes. It's more apparent perhaps when you turn it to one side. And you see it's not the eyeball showing, as in the case of the Nomoli, but just the upper eyelid. Characteristically, they show also indications, quite naturalistic indications, of moustaches, and even the kind of bulging, slightly pouting lower lip is apparent in them as well. The decoration may be significant, both when it appears in these large pedestal heads and when it appears on the Nomoli. because we have accounts of the people who were living in Sierra Leone in the 16th century, accounts written by the Portuguese, and they described how the chiefs and more important people would use golden rings, earrings, and rings on the nose, and would cut their hair, dress their hair in very striking patterns. Now that would suggest perhaps that these are representations of important people, perhaps chiefs, perhaps the heads of families, and that might give a clue as to their original use.